Welcome to our special meeting of Municipal Council today on Wednesday, September 15th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declaration of interest. Seeing none, I will move along to deputations. We have no deputations at this time. And item D is a workshop, and it's municipal servicing for condominium council workshop. So I'll turn it over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good morning to yourself, members of council, staff, and any public that are going to be viewing this interesting workshop session. So just to remind folks, we generally have 3 council meetings a month. The first and third are typical council meetings, and we reserve this one, the middle week of the month, for council workshops, which involve usually strategic and educational discussions. Today we have a two-part workshop. So the first part's an interesting topic. It's about the condominiums that are starting to be developed in our community, which are generally on smaller lots. The road network is a little tighter and has less ability to provide full typical municipal servicing. So we're going to have an interesting discussion and education session today on how these condominiums look, and servicing primarily for water and wastewater, snow clearing, and as well garbage collection. So that'll be the first topic. We have many members of staff that are going to speak to that topic, and that's topic number 1. Then we will proceed to a second part, which is going to be in closed session, where we'll be dealing with some strategic real estate discussions about lands that the town currently owns and potential future uses for them. Potential for looking for other lands as well that could be strategic acquisitions for our community and public use, and we will deal with that as well. And then we have a labor relations matter as well in the closed session. So I thought, no, Madam Mayor, I will pass it back to you, and I believe staff are prepared to kick off the presentation.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to it today, and this is item D, and it's municipal servicing for condominiums council workshop. Turn it over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the public, staff, and guests watching today's workshop on municipal servicing for condos. I'm Jeff Meggett, Director of Operations, and I'll be presenting part of today's workshop. So without further ado, next slide, please. Today we have 5 speakers presenting. Lawrence Cook, Manager of Planning, will provide a review of various types of condo developments that we might encounter. We will discuss the various municipal servicing considered for condos. Kingsley Blease, that you know well from Kingsley Blease Consulting, will also outline the MECP private water system regulations and the associated water quality legislation specifically designed for condos. Christy Beatty, our Manager of Water and Wastewater, will then review the 5-4 water quality agreement process, followed by Valerie Adema, the Director of Finance, to provide an overview of water billing for condominiums. And finally, I'll wrap up today's presentation with some considerations and next steps. Next slide, please. As a generic overview, municipalities require subdivisions to be built to municipal standards, with the town providing on-site municipal services, including road maintenance, water, sewer, waste, and recycling collection. Alternatively, site plans are often developed as private condos with road, water, and sewer infrastructure, not necessarily being constructed to municipal standards, which often provides residential developer with benefits, including potentially additional developer units and the ability to develop on unique parcels of land, which otherwise may not be suitable for development in a conventional subdivision. As a result, the services in condos typically remain under private ownership, with the condo corporation being responsible for ongoing service delivery. And that's not only for the capital works, but also for some of the operating costs. Through the site plan process, the town currently implements a common elements condominium agreement between the condo corporation and the town, which indicates what services are to be private and what's to be the responsibility of the condominium. That's an important legal document that is developed during the time of development. Next slide, please. I'll now pass the presentation on to Lawrence, the Manager of Planning. Lawrence?
Thanks, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. And go to the next slide, please. So just before we get into the different types of condominiums, I would like to clarify the term freehold. Now, here you see that you can actually have freehold in a condominium and freehold in a regular plan of subdivision. Now, in both scenarios, you own both the unit and the land that it sits on. You're both responsible for maintenance of the lawn, the roof, and the driveways. But the biggest difference is that a freehold condo, you have to pay condo fees to the condo association that is responsible for the maintenance of the common assets, like visitors parking and the private road that leads up to their individual units and the amenity areas. Whereas the freehold lot in a plan of subdivision has no monthly fees because they do not have an association that looks after the specific roads. Next slide. So I'll start going through some of the most common, common types of condos that we might see. The first one I'd like to talk to about is the standard condominium. Now, this can be taken in the form of an apartment building, townhouse, or even some non-residential developments. The key point of a standard condo, to generalize it, is that you only own the unit and not the land that it sits on. So if you can imagine a condo apartment tower, each individual owners own their unit in the sky, but not the land that the apartment actually sits on. The land that it sits on is actually owned by the condo corporation, which each individual owner has a stake in, of course. The individual owner has a say or a vote on how that condo corporation manages the land and all the related matters with, but each of the individual owners can only sell their unit to somebody else, and they cannot sell the land that it sits on. Similarly, with the townhouse developments, there are some development models that only lets the owner buy the unit and not the land that it sits on. And of course, these condo types will have different price associated with them and to attract the different market demands. And of course, in a standard condo, you would have to pay condo fees to pay for the maintenance of those common assets. In the condominium, it could be swimming pools, elevators, parking lots, or even cutting the grass. An example of this would be the proposed Aberdeen condo development in Mount Albert. Just a quick refresher that the site plan for this Aberdeen development consists of this ground floor retail with above grade residential units. And behind that development, those are the townhouses, and there's a block of semi-detached as well. The retail and the apartment units that is a standard condo, because the owners will not own the land, but they'll own each of the individual units. The townhouse and the semi portion of the Aberdeen development would be considered as a common element condo, which I'll talk about next. Next slide. So what is a common element condo? Well, the common element condo itself doesn't show the unit on the property. It's because the owner will own both the unit and the land that it sits on. So unlike the standard condo that I just went through, a common element condo owns both the unit and the land that it sits on. These are typically ground related to a development like a townhouse, where you come off a municipal road and then you have units fronting along a private road or a laneway. Going back to the Aberdeen example, it comes off of Center Street and it will go into a private road where there's a combination of townhouses and semi-detached. There, the owners will be paying condo fees to help maintain these private interests, such as the private road and the visitors parking. Next slide. And before I get to the last types of condos or categories of condos, I would like to explain what a POTL is, POTL, parcel of Thai lands. Just to keep things simple and generic, the term POTL is really used to describe the method of how a condo plan gets registered. It's when someone says POTL, what you should really picture is the owner will own both the land and the unit, but the remaining areas of the developments are maintained by the condo corp. Each owner of the lot may pay monthly to help maintain those common assets once again, like parking and amenity areas. And you can't sell, the main point here is that you can't sell the lands without selling their share of that common elements. Next slide. So this next type is called a vacant land condominium. Now, it's essentially how it sounds like. You're really purchasing a unit or a lot prior to construction of any standardized structure. So, like, meaning that there's no townhouses being proposed here. There's no apartment building. The opportunity to negotiate. This is an opportunity for you to negotiate or have a share in developing the plan with the developer. It's not very common, but it certainly is available. Vacant land condom corps have different types of dwelling. Could be, once again, apartment buildings or row houses. These things are all set together in a developer's declaration to restrict the sizes and the construction. So there's an agreement on what is going to be built when you purchase one of these future lands for development. Next slide. This last type of condo is really more of a category because this is more about a leasehold condo. Similar to a car where you lease, you technically do not own the condo unit or the land that it sits on. In a leasehold, the land is not owned by the condo corp. It's actually leased by a third-party landowner. And unlike a freehold where you can live on the unit forever, in a leasehold, you only own the unit as well your share of the common element for a term. Your fees will then contribute to the collective rent being paid to the landowner. And with regards to your own dwelling, you may have the same rights and obligation as a freehold under the Condo Act. You may sell or mortgage your unit without seeking the landowner's permission. But just to keep in mind that a lot of these leases are between probably 40 to 100 years, meaning that if you are someone that has bought a leasehold condo and you've been there for 35 years and you want to sell it at that point, you're 35 years into a 40-year lease, which means you're really selling the value of a 5-year lease with the opportunity to renew with that third-party landowner. And next slide. So here are just two condos that are, as you can see, are built and slashed in building, and that Jeff will go on from here to speak more about the municipal servicing in Mount Albert and Holland Landing. So I'll pass it back on to Jeff.
Thanks, Lawrence. Next slide, please. As a bit of background, municipal servicing for condos.
Jeff, just I think in the past we've had issues where we didn't allow for questions or discussion. So it might be an idea after each speaker if we just take a polite pause, and I apologize for that, and just to see if there's any questions or comments regarding Lawrence's initial briefing, and then we'll move on. So let's just, if we could, I think that might be helpful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I was thinking the same. Questions of Lawrence? I'm not seeing any at this. Oh, yes, we do. Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm not sure that this is a question specifically for Lawrence, but I can't help but think in some of the situations we're looking at that if we're looking to take over some services or provide some services, does that actually change the type of condominium and ownership that might be related to that condominium? And if it does, how are those fees looked after from a town point of view, or is it on a cost recovery basis, or how does that work?
Thank you. Jeff, would it be you or would it be Lawrence?
Great question. I'm even wondering, quite honestly, I don't know if Dean's with us, but this might be a very good legal question, to be honest.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, it may not even fall the way I'm thinking it might, but it seems to me that there would almost be, almost bordering on a change of type of condominium, and how does that affect us?
Thank you. And I see Mr. Horner's with us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Foster, I'll do my best, but I kind of think, from my perspective, that Councillor Foster sort of hit the nail on the head with this one, and I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question so much and if I fail to, I'm sorry, but ask it again and I'll try again. But I think you've hit on the issue, and the way I've always sort of understood this problem here is that when we provide municipal services, whether it's kind of sewer, sidewalk, or road, we have municipal standards that we apply, and that means that goes to sizing, it goes to access, it goes to quality of construction. So we build big, right? We build well for time because we know we're going to own and maintain the asset for ages, and we build big to provide for access, growth, that sort of thing. So when these condo developers come forward with applications, I think the tug and pull of the problem is, do you develop the site with capacity as required by the municipality, which is going to affect the number of structures, units that go on the site, or will you choose to do a condo corporation and then you can own these services yourselves, right? Like you can own the road, you can own the sidewalk, you can own the pipes, and then you can go smaller because you're not required to meet the municipal standard because the condo owns it. So if you go smaller, then you can put more units on the site. So in my own mind, that's how I've always kind of characterized the issue or the problem. So that condo development gets approved with the smaller road, the smaller pipes, maybe there's a sidewalk, maybe there isn't, that kind of thing. And then what we find is that the owners move in, and the owners find out that because of the condo structure, all of a sudden they're paying to maintain these services that a municipality will provide in the normal context. And so what's the answer, to the problem? I'm not sure. So I've tried to scope out the issues the way I sort of see them, Councillor Foster. But if you want to ask the question again, because I probably didn't answer it, please feel free.
Thank you, Mr.
If I may, Madam Mayor, yeah, thanks, Mr. Horner. I probably should have given you a call and give you a heads up on that one, but it just kind of occurred to me as we were talking about it. It seems to me that it changes the way it's owned and everything that goes along with it. So I'm just not sure where we fall on that, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to staff. And Councillor Foster raises a point that I was going to ask later on in the presentation, but I'll ask it now because I think it seems timely. I was just curious, what is within council's purview in what we can compel a condo developer to disclose up front in the sales process? Because I think sometimes, as was said earlier, people go into these agreements, purchase a unit, and then they don't properly realize, that, we're on the hook now for these extra, for garbage pickup or whatever the case may be. Are there any mechanisms legislatively that we could compel the developer to be completely forthright and explicit in what is expected? I know sometimes that comes at the time of closing when you're signing the agreement, but by then, it's too late to renegotiate. So, I just worry about council being, an instrument of due diligence after the fact. And I just want to know what we can compel to be disclosed during the sales process, because I think it would make, not only for condos, but for other subdivisions, I think that would make, our future lives easier. Just curious if there's any authority that we have to use in this instance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Maggot, would you be answering that question, or?
I'd be happy to. I see Lawrence with his hands up, but maybe I'll just take a stab at it through you, Madam Mayor. I believe right now the developer does declare the cost and what services are going to be provided by the condo board through the process. I think where the gap exists potentially is through resale in perpetuity. Every time the property is sold, the same issue is going to rear its head. And it's something we talk about later in the workshop, that there's a need to provide some ongoing communication to residents and to the condo board to make sure that as new homeowners move in perpetuity, they have to be made aware of the implication of costs. And yes, it's disclosed through the transfer of property, but if the homeowner doesn't do the due diligence and look into specifically what the services are and that the cost really is maintained by the condo board, they could be open for a surprise. So, Lawrence, anything to add to that?
Sure. What I was about to say was just similar to what Jeff summarized. So to add on to that, from a planning perspective, and the process of doing business is that the developer would have to provide to town staff a condo declaration. Now that what says in that condo declaration will simply indicate who owns what and who maintains what. Now that document is the legal document to make sure that the town's liable or not on certain services. And what Jeff says, that initial declaration, even if we agree to everything on that list and gets passed on to the first purchaser, now the obligation is between the resale parties to pass that condo declaration on to each other and understand everything is in there. And that's the what Jeff was speaking about. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Lawrence. That declaration, and thank you, that helps a lot. What would be the timing of that declaration? Would that have to be made at the point of sale or at the point of closing?
So when we approve a condo plan of condominium, typically we provide a condition of approval that they cannot register that condominium until we see that condo declaration and what that is. So that's when we ask for it. Between the time of sales and the condo declaration, yeah, that's something that's out of our control. It's from the planning process, but once we approve the plan of condo, we ask for that to see that declaration, and we won't register on title, making it legal until we are okay with that. Yeah.
So you would not even be able to enter into a sale with a prospective buyer until that declaration has been received by the town. Have I got that correct?
Mr. Horner has some information. He has his hand up. I'm wondering if it might be more appropriate for him to answer this question.
I was going to add too. Yes, the declaration the condo declaration is prepared when the condo is created, and that'll confirm to every unit holder in the condo, precisely what are common elements and what aspects of the condo will they be required to contribute maintenance fees for, all that kind of thing. So that's kind of on the upfront. But when I've acted for purchasers of condominiums in the past, as part of every condo purchase, all of those condo documents are made available to the purchasers. So the subsequent purchasers, again, they get a copy of the condo declaration. they get a statement that indicates, the balance of reserves that are within the condo corp that are available to service ongoing costs, that kind of thing. So when a purchaser is buying a condo, the purchaser and the purchaser's lawyer, their responsibility is to review all this stuff, to understand how it works, and to know that this is the deal that you want to get into before you buy. So that type of disclosure statement is all available to subsequent purchasers over time.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I hate to, I don't want to belabor the point, but this is an educational workshop, so I do want to be educated. There's a critical point between, the actual, when you agree to buy the condo unit, and then when you actually close the deal, there could be months, maybe even years that pass between the agreement to buy and the actual closing document with the lawyer. And I appreciate that in the closing document with the lawyer at the last day of everything, you get the keys and the whole bit, that is fully declared. I'm just curious, did they enter into this arrangement knowing at the front end, knowing what their obligations are financially within the system? And I apologize if I'm being too granular here, but I think it's important for at least for me to understand how this process works.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, I have several hands up. Mr. Webster, you go ahead.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Carruthers might be an expert on this too, from her background in the new home warranty program. But one thing I can assure you is when a purchaser buys a freehold unit, it's a pretty simple transaction, and there's no cooling off period. Essentially, if you buy a new home, most sales are immediately binding. With regards to a condominium purchase, there's a 10-day cooling off period. And the reason the government put that in place is because buying a condominium is a lot more complicated. And to my advisement, the builder and developer selling units is obligated to provide full disclosure of the condominium requirements through lengthy documents through TARION, the Ontario New Home Warranty Program, and through disclosure of all the elements. And those elements are disclosed to the best knowledge they have of the various attributes that would be part of the condominium corporation's financial responsibility. So that is my advisement. I stand to be corrected, but Mr. Horner, maybe you could shed some light. And I think a few folks have bought some condominiums possibly over the years and have seen these very lengthy documents that you have to go through as part of your 10-day due diligence prior to finalizing and firming up the purchase and sale transaction.
Mr. Horner, did you have anything to add? And then I'll move along to Lawrence.
No, Mr. Webster is correct. There's a 10-day cooling off period that provides for a review of the condo disclosure statement.
Thank you. Lawrence, did you have anything to add? I saw your hand was up.
Nothing more, just to agree with the statements that was made. Technically, you can buy a condo before it gets registered was the question. I just want to clarify, you can do that, yes.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess, and having bought and sold condos on behalf of clients, I do have some familiarity with this circumstance as well. I guess the complicating factor then becomes the role of the condo board. So once that declaration is filed and the developer turns the care, custody, and control of the condo corporation over to the duly constituted board, the board can then make very drastic and dramatic changes to those circumstances as well. And so it's a fairly complex circumstance. I guess, not to complicate matters further, but my question would be more, I'll send it to you, Mr. Horner. Under the Condominiums Act, are there provisions for the disbanding of that condominium corporation? Because basically what it is it's a corporation that gets established and registered on title, and there's a status certificate and a declaration that goes along with that. what are the provisions for disbanding such a corporation? I think that's really what we're hearing from these owners is saying, we don't like the way that our real estate deal is structured, and we want to change those circumstances. So what provides for that?
I have to confess, I don't know the answer. I mean, how do you unwind a condo? But I kind of think I take the point, right? If the point is that the roads and the sewers are a condominium, is there an opportunity under the Condominium Act? And it would have to be in the Condominium Act, and I think there must be a process set out that provides for unwinding a condominium. But I can't tell you today what it is. But I suppose that that's something that ought to be provided for in the Act. So I'd be surprised if it wasn't there. Taking these common element roads and out of the condominium and perhaps transferring them to the municipality. I think maybe that's sort of where you were headed with the question. I have to conceive that it must be possible, and there must be a mechanism in the Condo Act to do it. Don't know what it is, but I suppose the other issue is, are these roads, are these services, constructed to a standard where the municipality would want to assume them, would want to take them. And I can't answer that question. That's really CIES would have to kind of engage on that one.
I can't help but think that essentially what it is it's one large piece of land with a bunch of individual shareholders. And so if the condo wanted to disband, then every single one of those shareholders would have to agree to do so. And that would then create one piece of land that would then be private property, still private property, that would then have to have that conversation about, are these roads assumed? What happens to these houses? Do they get torn down or do they get built upon, etc.? And it's the same structure as it would be for a condo tower in downtown Toronto. And so that's the challenge that we're trying to deal with, is that we're using legislation that's for, initially intended for high rises, but we're now dealing with ground-based product as well. Thanks.
Mr. Webster, go ahead, please.
Further to Councillor Roy DeClemente's points, I think it's bang on. The Peter Street condominium, when it was going through the public approval process, it was an infill project, and it had a lot of public review of adjacent neighbors, you'll recall. And at the public meeting, it was specifically asked, how would garbage and snow removal be dealt with? That was one that was specifically asked, and the answer was it would be dealt with by the condominium corporation. And I think what's starting to happen here is, as good as the disclosure documents are, and this is Councillor Roy DeClemente's point, when the board actually forms. And so we were called as a town, I was called the night before the first board meeting, where the actual owners took over ownership from the condominium corporation. And the issue at hand was water supply. That was our initial delve into this. And that was when we got into the Dreamland condominium. It was, again, an additional one was, both of them initially focused on water. And now it's expanded through the last communique we received into other services such as garbage collection, and snow removal is another one that's pending. So we have many more slides to go that'll explain the various aspects of how these things can be dealt with. But it's good that we took a pause after our first speaker, because we've got a few more speakers to go. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. I have a couple myself, but I'm going to wait until the end. Possibly my questions will be answered by the other people that are presenting. So we'll go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great discussion. So we're going to transition now into a little bit of a discussion on municipal servicing. As a bit of a background, municipal servicing for condos has been discussed at council recently. The first report back in 2018 contemplated 3 services for condos: winter maintenance, waste collection, and water quality, and provided a recommendation to work towards a draft of a 1-year pilot agreement for both waste and water quality, for both monitoring and testing for the private drinking system for the Peter Street condo that Tom just referred to, and that's one in Holland Landing. This report also highlighted how the N6 municipalities were also currently servicing condos in their communities. The second report in 2018, as well as the memo from June 2019, both related to the actual one-year pilot agreements, getting council authorization to proceed into those agreements with both condos for municipal servicing. And this is basically what we're going to discuss in a little further detail as we move forward. Next slide, please. My favorite topic, waste management. Waste has many challenges in condo developments. The frequency of collection, the number of streams of material, which include garbage, recycling, organics, yard waste, Christmas trees, and even large appliances, results in a high number of very large collection vehicles regularly entering the site to perform curbside collection. These trucks are typically operated by a single person, although it can be two-person crew, and are also very heavily loaded with material. Condos with reduced road widths, tight corner radius, and dead ends result in inherent safety concerns and increased risk and increased potential for damage to private property, including roads and curbs. For these reasons, staff work with each developer quite closely to review the individual site design and to ultimately limit backing and provide the potential for safe municipal collection. Where possible, we want to provide waste management services in these private sites if we can. Unfortunately, in some cases, such as Dreamland, municipal collection just isn't possible due to the design of the site and the heavy requirement to back up these large vehicles. And that is absolutely where the majority of the accidents happen. And there's been many tragic cases with children or what have you getting severely injured or worse from waste collection vehicles. Next slide, please. Road maintenance, including winter ops, is problematic in condos. Similar to the concerns mentioned previously about waste management, narrow roads and boulevards in condos present maneuvering challenges for snowplows, which are also definitely single operator. Narrow boulevards and dead ends limit snow storage, which can have added costs and inefficiencies to remove the snow periodically before the next snowstorm hits. Additionally, visitor parking areas, on-street parking congestion complicate plowing operations that typically we may not be exposed to throughout town through a normal subdivision. And there's also a liability concern with damage to private road network from these winter maintenance activities. I just want to note that a recent survey from the N6 identified that all municipalities shared a common approach and did not provide either road or winter maintenance on private condominium sites. And this is the current practice in East Gwillimbury as well. Next slide, please. I also want to take just a second to talk about underground condominium, both for wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. They're typically located within private property, and similar to the pipe and infrastructure materials, they may not be consistent with town standards as they are built privately. As a result, accessing the infrastructure, performing maintenance and repairs can really be problematic, and just again because it's entirely within the private property area. And similar to the N6, this infrastructure remains private within condos to both maintain and repair as necessary. I will now pass the presentation on to Kingsley to discuss the MECP regulations related to private water systems. So without further ado, Kingsley.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me back. Good to see you all again. I'm just going to do a couple of slides. Basically, I'll start with basically what's the difference between the private public water systems. So for the public system, similar to what you're operating in Mount Albert and all your other systems, the MECP, which is the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, which is interesting because it used to be called the Ministry of Environment and then the Ministry of Environment and Energy. Well, so its current version is Environment, Conservation and Parks. But in essence, it's the Ministry of the Environment. And basically, they're the large systems and they're owned and operated by the public. Then you have the private sort of systems, and they sort of split into two categories effectively, basically the small ones and the large ones. The small ones, less than 5 units, typically one parcel or less with 5 freehold properties. And basically, the water main and plumbing are not subject to any of the Ministry of the Environment regulations. So they're separate. Whereas once you get larger than 5 units, which is what we're talking about, and they're very common, they are classed as private drinking water systems, and where the condo itself distributes the water to the properties, but is regulated by the ministry. And that means it must be operated by a licensed operator, reporting, etc. And hence we've been referencing the Peter Street. So basically that's the difference. That if it's a small private unit, basically it's not subject to any regulations. But if it's greater than 5, then they have to have a licensed operator report. There's a whole procedure to go through. So that's the sort of the systems. So we're talking about private larger than 5 units. So perhaps you could, the next slide, please. So for basically, it's all about water quality, and that's what we're mainly talking about today. That basically the ministry requires those systems to have that registered, to be registered to have an operator. But there is a regulation, which is regulation on 170.03, which actually does permit a town to act as that operating authority, but it is for water quality. And so they can do that on the behalf of the condo, and it's called Formal Agreement 5/4. But that includes the overall responsibility for water quality, and what that means is actually the sampling and testing of that water quality, but also addressing any complaints. So that's basically what we're talking about today, effectively. It's not about the operation of the water main services, it's about the water quality. So the condo corporation continues that responsibility for that infrastructure. And basically, if they don't enter into this agreement, then they're subject to the ministry requirements of that private system. And that's seems to be the most common approach. Typically that the condos look after it themselves, but have to provide the licensed operator and report to the ministry on a regular basis. So that's sort of the difference between the two systems. So that's my 2 slides. So I'll perhaps hand on to the next slide, if I may. That's Christy's going to talk to that.
Thanks. I'll just close up the section about water. So thanks, Kingsley, for that overview of the regulatory requirements and the options for condos to engage the town as the operating authority. So why would the towns and condos consider entering into these 5/4 agreements? Well, it helps the condo to meet their regulatory requirements for their private drinking water system. There's also a net overall savings for these condos to have the town as its operating authority, since the town staff are already monitoring and testing our municipal drinking water system in the same areas. We're also exercising this option eliminates the need for condos to hire a private for-profit contractor. Like Kingsley said, it requires a licensed operator to go in and do that monitoring and testing. Instead, the town can act as the operating authority if the condo chooses so, and we can provide water quality monitoring and testing on a cost recovery basis for staff time, supplies, and laboratory fees. For the town, acting as the operating authority ensures operations, maintenance, and monitoring of the drinking water system for all of our town residents, as well as addressing residents' concerns about water quality. It also helps us to coordinate operations efficiently between the municipal and drinking water systems. So I hope that gives you a good overview about some of the operation on water quality, as well as from the snow plowing and roads. So I think here would be a good time to take any questions about the service provision.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm not seeing any at this time. Very informative. I know a little bit about condos, but certainly not a lot. I am much more educated this morning in listening to the presenters for sure, and the pros and cons of condo purchases. So I thank you very much. Any other questions, comments?
We do have a few. Yeah, sorry,
Through you, Madam Mayor. We do have a few more slides, and we'll pass it over to finance. But if there's no questioning on servicing at this point, we can continue.
I'm not saying that. That's not to say that at the end we do have some questions that come back. Jeff, did you have a question or a comment?
No, I didn't. Just I'll take over the presentation. Sorry
Thank
for the
you.
bit of confusion there, but we just have a couple more slides and then we'll pass it on to Val. So we thought it'd be prudent just to give a real brief update on where we are with the 2 existing condos that we've newly entered into a 1-year pilot with. So the first one is Peter Street that's showing here with the map on the right. We entered a 1-year pilot back in January for water quality, as both Christy and Kingsley just talked about. All the underground infrastructure remains private, which even includes streetlights and fire hydrants. That's all private infrastructure. The roads, you can see even on the drawing there, does have designated parking areas and tight radius. So winter maintenance there is provided privately. But because this allows for essentially straight through movement, we've asked GFL to provide service in here, and they're able to safely maneuver their vehicles through here. So we have been able to provide waste collection on this site. Next slide, please. Now, King's Landing out in Mount Albert is a little different story. In June, we did enter a 1-year water quality pilot with them as well. Similar to the other site, Peter Street, the underground infrastructure remains entirely private. Road maintenance also is entirely private, as well as waste. The challenge here is the amount of backing that's required. The garbage truck, recycling truck specifically, pick up garbage from the passenger side. So we would have to back down each one of the laneways a minimum of twice to be able to service all the homes from their front doors. If there was either a hammerhead or the ability to drive straight through the site, we would be able to provide garbage collection, and we actually work with this developer quite closely to try and encourage them to modify the site to allow that to happen for us. Next slide, please. As Lawrence talked about earlier, pictured on the right is Averton. This is a site that has looping involved in it. We do believe we're going to be able to provide waste management services on the site, just because of, again, the limited requirement for backing. And Sharon Corners, the Rivera site in Sharon, is a vertical multi-story building, and that would remain entirely private for all services, including waste management, as the dumpsters there are essentially front-end bins and commercial style, and that would be a private system for them to maintain collection through. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I will pass it on to Val to talk about billing. Sorry.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my question would be, and maybe this is one of our key takeaways, but do the site plans for these, when I look back at the School Street site, I didn't see a location for waste storage, so that even if we wanted them to undertake their own waste management, there isn't a place for them to have an enclosure for those large containers where you would have one location. And I don't recall seeing one on the Dreamland Homes one either, and I'm not sure if there is one here. But when we're contemplating, or when we have a site plan that comes through to us, and I don't know whether this is a CIES question or a development services question, but when we have an application that is projected to be a condo, yes, we're looking at turning radiuses and visitor parking and even amenity space. But the snow storage was one that came up during School Street, but I don't think we even really considered waste management. Do these site plans also provide for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, great question. And yes, honestly, from a waste reduction standpoint, we really try and prefer to keep waste in front of each house if we can. There's definitely an added emphasis of ownership and responsibility for the material I put out. And we actually provide through the site plan process that the residents in that development receive the same level of service and expectations that all residents do in East Gwillimbury. So it's bi-weekly garbage collection, weekly organics, and weekly green bin, and that's provided. As a fallback, if we're into more of a vertical or commercial standpoint, then yes, we do permit garbage enclosures and front-end commercial collection, with an understanding that waste diversion becomes increasingly challenging in that type of setup.
Thank you for that. That's where I was going with it, because some of the condos that I've been involved with, or that I've had a knowledge of, they may not provide for a green bin waste stream, for example. You might be lucky if you have recycling, but it's all just goes into one place, and they really just there's one truck that comes and gets all of it. And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of as well. But if there's no place for it, then we have to make sure that they're not going to be pushing for, if we can't collect it through GFL, then we need to be aware that they will be wanting to do it privately, and that private servicing may not be the same 3 streams that we're currently doing at the municipal standard. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any.
So if you will, I will pass it on to Val now to talk about utility billing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of council. If we can go to the next slide, please. So condo units and single residential units differ slightly in the water billing process. A single residential unit has a single meter installed by the town that measures water consumption for that unit. The bill is directed to the homeowner and includes a delivery charge and variable charges that are based on the consumption calculated at Tier 1 and Tier 2 rates. For a condo community, a bulk meter is installed by the town at the entrance to that community that will measure consumption for the entire development. The town does not install individual meters within each unit. The bill is directed to the condo corporation and includes delivery and variable charges. The delivery charge is calculated based on the number of units within the community. The variable charge is calculated at Tier 1 rates only. The condo corporation is responsible for the entire amount and choose their own method of dividing up that cost to charge to the individual units. That sums up the differences between the two. I'm happy to take any questions before I hand it back to Jeff.
Thank you very much. Questions, Val? I'm not seeing any at this time. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. And one more. So just a couple more, just as a quick wrap up. There are a number of considerations that need to be evaluated as we continue to review new developments. As mentioned, service delivery is incredibly site specific, and every effort's made to work cooperatively with developers to allow for site designs which would provide for municipal service delivery where possible, definitely including waste management. Within private condo developments, that is typically the developer that's providing infrastructure oversight, as opposed to full municipal inspection and management of underground services. It does provide the town with greater security, as the condo is ultimately responsible to maintain their infrastructure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the town's engineering involvement is as engaged as it would otherwise be if it was going to be a subdivision and municipal-owned infrastructure built to our standards. Finally, it can't be understated that in perpetuity in a condo setting, homeowners are ultimately responsible for all ongoing capital and operating costs through monthly maintenance fees. Communications with residents and the condo board specifically has to continue to be an important measure to convey why some of these municipal services just can't be provided. Next slide, please. So consistent with other municipalities and our N6 partners, staff are drafting a current condo servicing policy for council's consideration that's going to incorporate the following. Firstly, that no municipal services are provided for road maintenance and snow removal from private property, as well as underground infrastructure for water, wastewater, and storm remains private. The second point is that where private road design allows for safe curbside collection from individual houses, that waste management services can be provided. However, no servicing to locations requiring either front end or bulk or common location areas would be considered. And lastly is water quality. Staff are reviewing the results of the current pilots underway and are evaluating continuing with the 5-4 agreements for testing and monitoring if we're requested by the condo to undertake this on a cost recovery basis. Next slide. And finally, as next steps, staff are going to continue to work with N6 to develop a harmonized development criteria for both horizontal and vertical developments, including site requirements for municipal services and waste reduction. And staff will be reporting back to council in the fall, seeking direction on the 2 pilot programs that are currently nearing the end of their term. So with that, the next slide is just a big thank you. And we're, on behalf of all the presentators, we open up to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From our previous council meeting, we had a piece of correspondence from the condo board at Dreamland in Mount Albert. My understanding is there will be a report forthcoming on that, and we're not necessarily dealing with that today because this is an education session. Have I got that right?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, I believe that's correct. Yes, it is. It was referring to waste management in that one development.
Correct. Okay. All right, then I won't belabor that here. I'll save that for the report. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. No further questions.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm not seeing any at this time. I'm still so much better educated on condo, have not been involved with it much at all before. And this has been a terrific education session for myself, and I'm assuming for others as well. Do we know if there are any condos proposed for East Gwillimbury in the wings, so to speak, that may be coming up in the next short or longer period of time, other than the Averton one that we're well aware of?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have an active application with the Rice Group in Mount Albert. That is being proposed as a condo that will be coming to council maybe later on, but that is certainly one we have in the queue, aside from the Averton one.
Thank you. It's good to know that we have some coming up. I know when the first one was built on Peter Street, and shortly thereafter, I was contacted about the issues that they had. I wasn't aware that there were any others coming along the way until, of course, the applications came to us, and we now have Dreamland in Mount Albert and others that are. It looks to me that are going to be a part of the market, I think, in our community. So better to get everything resolved at this point before they come than try to fix something after along the way. I don't know how we can possibly ensure that future purchasers understand the condo rules, other than if they're talking to any of us staff or elected officials, to make sure that they have a good lawyer that is going to make sure that they understand all the issues that are in place. There's certainly many positive, but there also are some that are not quite as positive. So I just hope that as they come forward, we're dealing with two now, and hopefully the others will come on side and understand. People will understand before they actually sign on the dotted line. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Thank you to staff for a great presentation. I have a motion, be it resolved that the Municipal Servicing for Condominiums Council Workshop presentation dated September 15th, 2021 be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Foster and Councillor Persichini, all those in favor? And that's carried. At this point, we are going to move into a closed meeting. To proceed into a closed meeting of Municipal Council, be it resolved that Council proceed a closed meeting of Municipal Council at 10:59 to deal with the following matters: a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, Municipal Act Section 239, 2C, strategic property discussion, and labor relations or employee negotiations, Municipal Act Section 2392D, labor relations. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Crothers, all those in favor, and that's carried. And we'll take a few minutes, 1 or 2 at least, to go into private session before we proceed along. We are now in open session to rise and report from a closed meeting. And this would be timing. I've done that one. We're down to bylaws. You want to do that one outside? Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the rise and report, please. Councillor Persicini, Councillor Carruthers, all those in favor, and that's carried. We're at bylaws. And do we have staff speaking on this?
I can speak to this one, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
We have the bylaw appointing Alexander Harris as clerk before you today.
Thank you. And I believe under F1, all members of council have that information in front of them. If you'd like me to read it out, I can. If not, we can, I probably should, I guess. Corporation of the Town of East Gwillimbury, it's to provide for the appointment of Alexander Harris as municipal clerk, whereas the Council of the Corporation of the Town of East Gwillimbury has established the office of municipal clerk in accordance with the Municipal Act Section 2001, setting out the duties of the clerk in bylaw number 2009-111, and whereas it is desirable to appoint the municipal clerk, now therefore the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the Town of East Gwillimbury, in accordance with Section 228 bracket 1 of the Act, and acts the following: that Alexander Harris is hereby appointed to the position of municipal clerk for the Corporation of the Town of East Gwillimbury, and that bylaw number 2013-001 be repealed and acted and passed at this date of the 15th of September. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Oh, I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Crone, Councillor Roy Clemente, thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. And I have a confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-075, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a special meeting of council, municipal council held on September 15th, 2021, being acted as read, being taken as acted and read and acted and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Persicini, Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. And we will have an adjournment at 12:50. We covered a lot of ground in that period of time. Wow. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff. Very enlightening morning. Lots of creative juices flowing. Appreciate that very much. And everybody hung in for us, so that's great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.